trying to eat a little bit of my breakfast as well. Looks like we've got a lot of folks putting into the chat. If you're just joining us, love to see your position and your university in the chat so that we can keep track of all that have been here or all that are here. Eric, I'm enjoying your vintage black and white webcam and showing off the superior technology at Somerset. Is that what we're doing here?
Ironically, no. This is my secondary place at my shop on my farm, which has pretty questionable internet. So we're bandwidthing down by having no color.
Very nice. That's actually high tech too. This is the first time I've seen a lot of folks, go to the little black box, but I appreciate your thoroughness and thoughtfulness in terms of trying to reduce the bandwidth while still being present and getting to share your.
Yes, that's what I go for.
Exactly. Awesome. We're coming up on 9 o'clock, and so we'll give it just a couple more minutes. Again, thanks to everyone who's here. It's really important that we go ahead and get together every so often and just kind of remind ourselves the larger project, and these nanocolliders are an awesome opportunity to showcase the things that we're doing in our various places. And so it's pretty important, and I'm so happy to see all of you. Yeah, sometimes I wonder if we need to have like an international Zoom symbol for my bandwidth is terrible. Like it's a little black box, but yet there's some sort of like signal that it's not, that's just what it is. Or that I'm eating, because nobody wants to watch me eat. You'd rather look at my little face.
Hello, everybody. Thanks for coming.
Thanks, Rodney.
I did my introduction. I'll turn it back over to Zara. For those of you who don't know who I am, I'm Rodney Andrews. I'm the program director and principal investigator for Kentucky EPSCoR. NSF EPSCoR, sorry.
Yes, all the acronyms in there. All right, well, we're right at 9 o'clock. For anybody who is just joining us, if you could go ahead and put in your position and your location in the chat. We'll use that as a means to keep track of everybody that's here. We could also just take screenshots, but it's easier if we've got all the information. So glad to see so many faces and so many boxes. I know it's a Friday. Thank you for waking up with us and getting to celebrate one of our partners in the EPSCoR project. Kazi, so happy to see you. I can't tell you how thrilled I am that you're going to share more about.
Hi, everyone. If you guys could please mute your microphones if you're not presenting. I feel like we have our youngest participant on the line today, which is great.
Great. There we go. Okay, back to Kazi. So always great things that are happening at Kentucky State. I'm not going to, other than just praising his willingness to be on this project and all of the energy and that he puts into it, the excitement, the really having a passion for working with students, both the ones that they're their peers and the mentors and the peers and the leaders and the whole thing. So I'm going to go ahead and let Kazi just take it away and tell us more about what you do.
Great. Well, thank you, Zara, for the kind introduction. Good morning to all of you folks. I fully recognize that this gigantic project led by Rodney called Campers, the main focus is research. There is no question about that. But today, if I can, I know my audience is primarily a research-focused audience. So if I can, I'd like to bring in a small component, although I called it small, although it falls under workforce development headed by Zara. I would like to tell you how important it is to develop students in the STEM pipeline, starting at the undergraduate level. Just as an introduction, I should also tell you that I'm here in my basement for your reference. I have two other people in this presentation, Camron from his house and Dr. Xie from UK in Lexington. So I am Kazi. I represent Kentucky State University. Just a couple of things about Kentucky State University. Out of these 7 partners in this giant effort, Kentucky State University is the small university with only about 2,000 students. 3 things you should know about Kentucky State. Many of you are probably familiar with it, but let me go ahead and mention those. Those 3 things are, it's a liberal arts university, it's the only HBCU, as well as a land grant university. So there are 2 parts to our conversation today. I'll keep my portion very short, about 15 minutes. After that, we'll introduce Camron in the second half. In the first portion, I will talk about a program called Peer-Led Team Learning. I'd like to tell you a little bit about peer-led team learning. It is not an acronym. It is not a name that we invented. It is actually a national model. It is a national model that's used throughout the country in many different universities, in individual departments. What impact does it have on Kentucky State University and how we implement that project is what I'm going to talk about. So Rosemary is going to do the slides for me because, as several of you mentioned, my internet here in Frankfurt is probably not the best. So Rosemary, if you would go to the next slide, please. Thank you. So I wanted to look at one situation that covers African-American students, African-American group. Take a look at the current situation. And I am making this as an example to highlight the point how underrepresented minorities are still not a well-represented group in the STEM workforce. So they represent about 13%. However, when we look at STEM, the fact is diversity is not reflected, as you can see through these numbers. As it turns out, if you look at other minority groups, for example, Hispanic American, the situation is not a whole lot different. Some of these numbers I'm quoting here is a bit dated because they go back to when I was writing during the first cycle of this EBSCO, meaning the previous cycle. So the numbers have changed. Yes, we're talking about change, but in the next slide, if you will, I'd like to show to you, I'd like to prove to you how things haven't changed a whole lot. Why? Because as I was trying to contemplate what we can do at Kentucky State University to change our situation with STEM graduation and retention about 10 years ago, I came across this document from 1975 that was done by National Academy of Sciences, National Research Council, and it was, I believe, asked by Congress to do it. And these are not my wordings. These are some of the highlight of the 1975 report, folks, that there is no single model or a formula that works. However, they recommended several things. I highlight those to tell you that when we decided to implement this peer-led team learning model, we found out that we do have commitment from faculty and administrators. That's a critical ingredient. And you must have a comprehensive plan, and you are targeting it into a certain population. Next slide, please. So even after 45 years, I find out it's amazing that we are talking about this same recommendation that was made all that time ago, and yet we have a lot of work to do. So what is it that we have done at Kentucky State? This is not reinventing the wheel. It is a very simple model that was pioneered by Yuri Treisman I believe, as part of his graduate work. I referenced that in the second bulletin. The Treisman model found out a couple of things, if you want, or Treisman work, that in the underrepresented minority group, one of the biggest problems is that they do not necessarily see peer models to look up to. They lack that, but they do their best work when you put them into small groups, working with friends like them, people they can see that, yeah, it's okay to be in here. So it's that kind of model that took off, and that Treisman model has been replicated through this peer-led team learning model throughout the country, as I mentioned, in individual departments. What we are doing slightly differently, if you will, we have tweaked that model to fit Kentucky State's small STEM program. As I mentioned at the beginning, we are primarily a liberal arts university. However, we do have a robust number of STEM students. If I look at their graduation rate, retention rate, we felt that there is a need to cover all the STEM areas. And for Kentucky State University, that will be chemistry, biology, mathematics, applied mathematics, and computer science based on the NSF definition. So with that kind of thinking, what we try to do is take a multidisciplinary approach using the PLTL model with several specific requirements to make sure that we maximize the dollar that we're going to spend on this project. Next slide, please. So in the next two slides, what we do is give you some very brief idea about how we implement that PLTL model at Kentucky State. I'm not going to go too much over it, but anybody who is interested, I know your focus is research. I thank you for listening to this undergraduate related project, if you will, but it is very important. Why? The fact of the matter is our overall graduation is very low, so we cannot serve the whole university. So the PLTL model is specific to this STEM student population at Kentucky State. However, at this point, I have to mention one thing, and that is that covers about 1/4 of all our student population. The requirements are out there. The funding that we receive for all this work comes from two specific sources. I do need to mention it explicitly. One of them is the NSF LSAMP. The other is the NSF EPSCoR program. Why is that? There's a reason behind it. The LSAMP program allows me to support only URM, underrepresented minority. We are an HBCU and roughly about 55% of our student body is African American. But I felt that we have an obligation to serve our entire population body. So thanks to you folks, thanks to EPSCoR support, we get to do all of that. So throughout the conversation, when I refer to PLTL, it is serving all of the STEM student body that we can. That represents, as I mentioned, about 25% of all STEM majors at Kentucky State University, of all races, all colors, all backgrounds. So I'm thankful for that, but make no mistake about it, LSMP support is very strongly encouraged. And the EPSCoR program through Rodney now have collaboration in terms of talking to each other and complementing each other with both the programs. As I mentioned, our overall goal through the focus is on graduation and retention, but we also want to make sure that we continue to increase for all groups the STEM graduation 10 to 15% per year. What is it that we're doing? How is it working? In the next slide, we'd like to touch on a couple other things. Very quickly, as I mentioned, the peer-led team learning program is not something we invented. We follow the national model. There are a whole bunch of guidebooks that covers the type of work that needs to be done in these workshops. I would like to point out, we have excellent faculty, Professor Paulson in chemistry, Professor Batra in physics, Dr. Kashan in mathematics, but the core, the backbone of the program lies with peer leaders. I cannot emphasize the importance, the role the peer leaders play. If you come to Kentucky State University, Rosemary and Zara, I believe, have done so at one time. It is wonderful to watch how these groups, and once again, all we're doing is replicating that model. The model says 2 hours of work per week is the minimum. Any less than that, the program is not that effective. So we are keenly aware of it. So we do that, we use the model. However, I must mention also to you, since March 23rd, we are on online platform because of the pandemic. There are exciting things that are happening in the online platform. I cannot tell you that I can guarantee the effectiveness of the close proximity work that was being done in the previous 7 years in that program. So I'm looking forward to coming out of this online platform and getting back to face-to-face, but we still like to make sure it is effective. We're kicking off next Tuesday with about 50 people. Once again, going back to the funding source, the 50 is roughly broken down between 25 in LSMP and 25 in EPSCoR. Next slide, please. So that's a very broad perspective. Here are some of the fine details that I'm not going to dwell on it too much. There is a component that I strongly believe serves well for the PLTL program. You have to have a sense of discipline. You cannot be late. You must be there on time. Roughly for their stipend. This is not free money. I'm simply the custodian of the program. This is federal money. It is our duty to make sure what we said that we are going to do, we try our best to make that happen. So the students attend roughly, each and every one of them, 28 hours of PLTL workshop per semester. And the way, if you will, it's a carrot approach. The way I like to encourage them, and believe it or not, I can have that conversation another time in length. That incentive, that when I see, next slide, please, when I see that you passed all your STEM courses and you are working on your GPA, that stipend money is given to them. That is above and beyond their scholarship. It goes straight to them. But it is amazing how wonderfully it works because they strive. So you are creating the environment, you are facilitating the process, but it's the students who are working with each other. That's where the name comes from, peer-led team learning. So it's based on last 7.5 years of work. I am here proudly telling you, we estimate that roughly between 75 to 80% of the students who are in the program are being retained and they're moving on to graduation. How does that compare to the rest of the university? Can't talk about it. I don't have those numbers. However, I can make a comparison where similar programs were used to show the effectiveness of it. Next slide, please. As it turns out, here are some pictures on, I cannot take you over there today, but from the past over the years, next slide, please, you will get a sense of how they work. But here is a slide that shows you comparison that was done properly. As you know, when you put these numbers, you can't just throw those numbers. You have to have a matrix, you have to have a benchmark group, you have to have a comparison group. So believe it or not, University of Kentucky, Dr. Joe Wilson in the early 90s did PLTL in the physics department, I believe, for several years. And even now on individual department-wide, that kind of model is used. But this comparison between a whole bunch of universities clearly indicates to you that it works. And we have found the same thing at our institution. So I'm happy about that. Next slide, please. So the next component of our work is to make sure, that comes from the funding source as well, is to make sure the students who are doing well in the PLTL have the knowledge. And it is my goal to try to focus primarily on students with undergraduate research during the summertime who has the highest potential to go on to graduate school. However, that may not work out all the time, but what impact does research have? It's mind-boggling. I can tell you, if you allow me to make a personal connection with the first bullet item that I presented here, all of this started about 20 years ago with a small grant from EPSCoR when I came to a guy you might know in the audience, Rodney's lab in carbon nanotube. That is what got started. As you can imagine, let me make a personal observation. Just like all of you wonderful research folks, our goal is to focus on research, have graduate students, have lots of publications, career development, and so on and so forth. Certainly that was my goal at that time. However, very soon we recognized that Kentucky State University lacks proper research infrastructure. So I have to do those research in collaboration with other universities. So down the road, we made the switch from personal research goals, if you will, to try to engage as many undergraduate students. And that's where EPSCoR and LSMP comes in. So the focus shifted, if you will, from me to the students. Instead of one student, I'm able to work with a whole bunch of students. So each summer, out of those 50 students or outside, roughly 10 to 15 students are selected to do research at University of Kentucky, University of Louisville, and so on and so forth. Just to tell you the impact this kind of thing has, going back to that 2001 carbon nanotube conversation, the gentleman who worked, Mr. Ba, with Christine in her lab, is a research professor at Syracuse University Upstate Medical Center. So we have had a whole bunch of students who have gone on to do bigger and greater things. He was funded from that, and I will share several other students what they're doing. So the partners I'd like to recognize is the University of Kentucky Energy Center, ERTL, the Environmental Research Training Lab, does not exist anymore. However, I must recognize contribution of Gale, civil engineering, ag engineering. We work with Tanya now. I probably will leave many names out. Chemical engineering, Dr. DB, Dr. YT. So everybody is in this partner. When you are going as a host to somebody's lab, I'm not the boss. You follow their protocol, so the students have to make a transition. But what it does to those undergraduate students, folks, I cannot tell you, it's mind-boggling. The reason I mentioned that, yes, I do recognize you research folks quite often do not fully appreciate the contribution undergraduates can make. But in this conversation that you're allowing me to make, I will urge you to please have an open mind. And if possible, do allow undergraduates to be part of your lab, because that lack of infrastructure is priceless. That facility that you have, all those things. Two recent graduates, Corey Maddox Jr. worked at YT's lab. The exposure to instrumentation and everything he had, guess what? Just several months ago, he got hired as a chemist with the Kentucky Transportation Cabinet. Czar, Workforce Development in Action. Amber Persons, we had a collaboration with Kentucky, the Central Environmental Lab, where our lack of instrumentation was complemented with the state-of-the-art GCMS, FTIRs, and atomic absorption. And she has recently joined the Kentucky Radiation Lab. So these are some few examples. I want to slowly shift now to the research component. Next slide, please. It shows the impact that I'm talking about. The confirmation of that is one survey that was done many years ago by exiting Harvard students. Next bullet item, please. It showed the biggest impact. Students mentioned, Harvard graduates, 25% mentioned supervised research mentorship made the biggest difference. When I looked at Cheyenne Boone coming from ERTL research, if you will, she was a transformed person. So I thank you for all of your partners who help us in that venture. Next slide, please. Like to give you a highlight of some of the recent work that was done. Notice each and every one of them is a poster presentation or a presentation at Kentucky Academy of Science or at the posters of the Capitol. The picture you're looking at, Miss Jordan Wells, happens to be in medical school right now. She worked in DB's lab. Mr. Madden, the last headline that you see, worked at the Energy Center. He, as an undergraduate, completely designed and built a controller box for about $500 for Mike Wilson's lab and under Rodman's supervision, working with Eduardo and Professor Mark Crocker's group. Where is he now? Finishing up his bachelor's in electrical engineering at UK. So we are a STEM pipeline. That's what we're creating. The pandemic tossed us from our track. The 5 people who were selected by the time March 23rd came around to do research, unfortunately, everything was canceled. So Jeff Mossy, if you're listening, I urge you, please allow us to get caught up. We are in that process. We recognize that. I'd like to give you an example. Next slide, please. example of what we mean by that. What we mean by that is the crisis restricts our ability to go to the labs. So we have a student who will be coming up next in a few minutes, Camron Aber, working with Dr. Xie, a new professor at University of Kentucky. I hope many of you will find their presentation more exciting than mine. He's going to demonstrate his ability on what he's doing over there. But I also wanted to mention that we do have a future plan, and that is we are continuing with PLTL, but I'm looking forward to expanding our research collaboration with the UK and EKU and Moorhead, the new partners under Camper's platform. The 75 document that I referenced, there it is. I find it very interesting. Two of the people I will mention is Reverend Theodore Hesburgh, the president of Notre Dame, and Vernon Jordan, whole bunch of the folks. I have the hard document of that. It's quite revealing. So we use that, we learn from history and do the best we can. So I'll pause, I have talked enough. If you have quick questions I can answer before I turn it over to Camron. Thank you, Rosemary. Any quick questions for me, please? Maybe we can take questions later on. I'd like to introduce you to Camron. Let me say a couple of things. He is an undergraduate computer science Kentucky State University student. It is my pleasure to tell you that he has been able to work with Dr. Xie of UK Electrical Engineering Department on an exciting project that he will talk about now. Thank you. Camron, all yours.
Thank you. I'm Camron. I met Dr. Javed through his PLTL program, which I benefited greatly from. It gave me a designated study time that I had to show up for. I had access to peers within my major, just sitting at the same table with me, so I could go to them. And the PLTL stipend definitely played a factor into not having to work a part-time job on top of attending school full-time. And as if I didn't already have enough to be thankful for, he coordinated with Dr. Xie at UK to get me this internship in robotics. It was supposed to start last summer, but because of COVID, we didn't start until September 21st. So Dr. Xie is an assistant professor of autonomy, robotics, and controls at UK. She has a lab that focuses on collaborative robots. So collaborative robots are robots that are intended to safely interact with humans within a shared space. They're usually lightweight, they have a limited speed and force, so it doesn't injure someone if it accidentally bumps into them. And on top of that, software and sensors can further ensure safe behavior. And it helps if they're user-friendly and easy to teach new tasks. So these pictures are just some examples of collaborative robots. The one on the left is the ABB Yumi. The middle one is Baxter by Rethink. And on the right is the QCut Iwa. So I'd like to show a quick example video of a robot called Moxie, and it's for the healthcare industry. Go ahead and play that.
The robots we build are mobile manipulation platforms. They're on wheels. They can navigate around the entire hospital, and they also have an arm, so they can pick things up and put them in other places. With our initial customers, we're looking at a whole variety of support tasks that these robots can do to sort of give time back to the clinical staff so they can focus on patient care. There's research showing that something like 30% of a nurse's day is spent and sort of hunting and gathering the supplies and lightweight equipment that are needed for patient care. We believe this is a real opportunity for robots to take on some of these support tasks to give that time back to the nurses.
And I feel Moxie is especially relevant today because of COVID. I think there's huge potential for Moxie to reduce human-to-human contact and exposure risk. But the company that designed the arm for Moxie also happened to make the robot that's in Dr. Xie's lab, and that's the Canova Gen 3. It's got 7 joints, so 7 degrees of freedom. It's intended to be a collaborative robot, so it's got all those properties I mentioned earlier, like it's lightweight. It can't lift much. Whenever it's fully extended, it can only lift about 2 kilograms continuously. It's designed to be safe. It's got embedded 2D, 3D vision, and in each actuator, or each link, there's sensing for torque, current, and then temperature, so you don't burn out the motors. So, excuse me. I would have loved to do some direct experimentation with this, but I need to know what I'm doing first before I take control of this expensive machine. So all of my work was done in a simulation platform called Capellius. And here's the logo. It's pretty versatile. You can simulate pretty much any robot in it, and you can write controllers for those simulated robots in a variety of languages. I focused on Lua and MATLAB. But after you write those controllers, you can then embed them directly into the robot, the actual robot. And this is what it looks like. And this is actually showing me, it's like a behind the scenes of me setting up the animation for the next slide. So you have an arm that's made up of joints interconnected by links, much like a chain. And mathematically, the most straightforward way to control it is to specify each joint angle. But we really want to know where that leaves the tip of the robot or the end effector in 3D space. So the problem of converting from the joint angles to the XYZ position, that's forward kinematics. And this animation on the right, so when the arm is pointing straight up, that means all the joints are set to 0. And what it's doing, all the joints are set to the same value, and it's oscillating between, like, I want to say positive 100 and negative 100 degrees. But usually what we want to do is be able to specify a position and orientation for the end effector, because I mean, that's the part with the tool on it. So the process of going backwards, figuring out which joint angles would leave the tip at a certain position, that's called inverse kinematics. And there can be a finite number of solutions to that problem. There can be no solutions, or there can be infinitely many. And when there's infinitely many, that means there's some redundancy, or you have more joints than are strictly necessary for the task. So these next few slides are just a brief explanation of redundancy. Oh, and this animation on the left is given 3 target positions and orientations, and it's just interpolating between them. So this arm, for example, it has 4 joints. That's the green and the blue ones. The red dot on the right, that's not a joint. That's just the target position for the end effector. So it has 4 degrees of freedom, and we want to specify the end effector's position. That's 2 values, X and Y. So we need 2 degrees of freedom. So 2 joints, so that leaves 2 left over. So this is a redundant system. It has infinitely many solutions. And the green joints that are sweeping, that's just demonstrating the infinitely many solutions. So if you care about where the arm is pointed, like for example, if you have it holding a glass of water, you don't want it to spill it. This is just on the plane in 2D. So that's 3 values, X, Y, and theta, the angle. So since you need 3, there's only 1 left over in this example. Oh, and looking at the Gen 3, it has 7 degrees of freedom. And to describe position and orientation in 3D space, you need 6 values. X, Y, and Z for the position, and then alpha, beta, and gamma for the orientation. So you need 6. The Gen 3 has 7, so that means there's always at least 1 degree of redundancy for any given position and orientation. And this redundancy allows it to be more dexterous, and it can complete secondary tasks such as obstacle avoidance without affecting the primary task. So for future research in Dr. Xie's lab, I have some options. With collaborative robots, there's the robot itself, but it needs to be able to sense what the person or people are doing. So in our lab, she has the Gen 3 robot itself, but she also has a motion capture system called Perception Neuron. And if anyone remembers the Kinect, Microsoft came out with a newer one that's not for video games, but it's for research, and that's called the Azure Kinect. And on the right are the research topics in her lab. The first one is the issue of safety with collaborative robots. We need to develop intelligent obstacle avoidance algorithms to protect both the human and the equipment. We also need to develop fault-tolerant robots to ensure that they can still fulfill our remaining task after a failure occurs. The second is efficiency. We need to develop intelligent task and motion planning algorithms to improve the efficiency of human-robot collaboration. And to guarantee the safety and efficiency of this collaboration, the communication between the human and the robot is very important. And so there are several ways to facilitate this communication, including human motion prediction, human-like motion planning, so just making the arm move more human-like, and then teleoperation for remote control. And I'm leaning more towards the task and motion planning part of things. I really like the idea of using machine learning to train a robot to do a certain task instead of explicitly programming it. That's it. I would like to thank Dr. Javed for everything he's done for me, Dr. Xie for advising me through all this, and the EPSCoR program for funding it all. Thank you. Any questions?
Awesome. That was a great job. It was really fun to watch. I've seen those robots
Thank
at the
you.
hospitals and always like wondering a little bit more
Mhm.
about all the little things that go into it. So really impressive. Thank you for sharing.
Thank you.
Just wanted to mention for the research audience, if anybody has any question for Dr. Xie, she's also available in this platform. Definitely Czar, Rodney, all of you for allowing us to make this presentation. All three of us here, if anybody has any questions.
Kazi, we did have one question from Joseph Brill in the
Okay.
chat. And
Okay.
he asked, how many semesters does a student typically participate in PLTL?
Very good question. The answer is, as long as you keep passing, we will keep on supporting you until you go to graduation. Let me say how driven some of the students are. Of course, the 75% number that I referred to, many students will fall short. But over the years, I have had many students who did not quite make it with a grade, let's say in a given semester. According to our protocol, you cannot be in PLTL the next semester. I won't give you the funding. You fell short. They will come back and tell me, you mark my word, I'm coming back to you. So they will rectify that situation, get back on track. And sure enough, we have had several cases where students, it serves as an incentive, if you will, like a personal challenge, working with peers. So we will keep on supporting until they graduate.
All right. Well, you know what we need to do is a round of applause. I know this is great. Thank you so much. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
It was fun to see. It was, you know, and my heart is I'm happy that there are students that are able to do some research, and you know, even if you can't get into the lab right now. So that's it's good to see that too. So
that's right.
And I guess if there's not anything else, we can go ahead and Rosemary, yes.
Yeah, of course. Got some polls to run. Every one of these meetings, we like to launch polls. So here's the first one related to today's meeting.
Well, that's running. I just wanted to also thank Dr. Javed for doing this, but also just for the incredible support you've provided to your students and to NSF EPSCoR, you know, for as long as I've been running the Kentucky NSF EPSCoR program. He was very modest about describing the success of the program. It has certainly been one of the highlights for us to report on to NSF. When we have had, you know, our site visits and our reverse site visits, this is a highlight when we talk about it. The outside panelists who do our reviews are always very impressed with the work that's done and with the results that have come out of it. And, you know, Dr. Javed gets all the credit for that. He's done an incredible job with this. And, you know, it's been a tough year and you guys have still soldiered on, and that's been fantastic. So thank you.
Thank you, Rodney. But I have to say, I'm just a catalyst. I'm just a facilitator. It's the leaders, it's the faculty, it's the students. We are in the background. We're just making it happen because the fact of the matter is many of these students going to regional colleges never will have this kind of opportunities. So we found a way, thanks to your support and everything, to at least the folks who have the potential, and you just saw one of them, folks like Camron, who will have that opportunity. So yes, not everybody can go to a fantastic College of Engineering at UK, but it's nice to see that we recognize this pipeline can actually extend to other regional students.
The other comment I'll add with all this is, and this just is on the poll question, but if you haven't had the opportunity to host one of the students in your laboratory, I really encourage you to do it. there is nothing better than a wildly enthusiastic undergraduate research student. Can be their own challenges, but it's definitely worth it. And we've been lucky to do that at the Energy Center for many, many years, probably 2 decades now. And I do strongly encourage you to do that. It's something that, obviously EPSCoR supports. We encourage you. We have, the summer funding program for these students. So I really do encourage you to take advantage of that. It's quite fun, actually.
That's right. That's right. You're right, Rodney. And as it turns out, does it work 100% of the time? No. I have had one student that I had to pull out because once he got into the research environment, he probably was not all that energized. But overwhelming majority of the time, the transformation is just truly amazing to watch. They just come back elevated that, hey, I can do this. And they get a flavor of what real high-tech technology-oriented labs look like. So that is something that we cannot provide. So it's important. And of course, in this discussion, Dr. Xie, of course, is a new faculty at UK, but I know Kemper's robotics is a huge focus. So it is my hope that even though Camron is working, that Dr. Xie will be part of the bigger community and make some contributions as well.
Dr. Javed,
It looks like we have a.
Oh, got another question. I was going to say, Eric Woolwich asked, what was your typical marketing recruiting approach?
I'll just jump in and say specifically, what's the most effective that you have found nowadays?
Wow. Eric, that's such an excellent question. I remember enjoying your presentation last time when we met in NanoCollider. The answer is none, just word of mouth. Guess what? Just on that answer, I can go on for a long time, but I'll give you a 30-second answer. Folks who are in the PLTL program, they know what their obligations are, just word of mouth. Yes, I can pull, I used to make flyers, but literally go around to the student center and so on and so forth, because I don't have a staff or assistants or whatever you want to call it. But that's not needed, just the word of mouth, folks who are in the program. But they also know that this is not a freebie. So the folks who are not willing to do the work and so on and so forth, as I mentioned, suppose EPSCoR says, oh, Kazi, this is terrific. We're going to double the funds. I'm going to say, no, thank you. Not needed. I can't use it. The amount of funds we're getting from EPSCoR and LSM, that's a weird statement, isn't it? It's just enough for me to support the number of students within the KSU STEM population who will already know about the program, the requirements, and the expectations. They will join. I don't have to go find them. They find us. Thank you.
That's good. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
I will take this moment to remind everyone that in lieu of our next NanoCollider, we'll have our Super Collider on Friday, February 26th. You can find more information about that on our website. If you just go to kynsfepscor.org, on the top menu, you'll see a link for Super Collider. And there's a special link this year for students, since our poster presentations will be taking a different format virtually this year. Thanks, Kevin. He just...
I'm thinking Czar gets to say the last words.
Yeah, let me launch one more poll from our EPSCoR team.
Okay.
Feedback.
Yeah, I had a feeling Rosemary had more questions.
right, thank you. All right, Zara, before I pass it off to you, I just want to make one more announcement, please. Our EOD team, we are partnering with the National Center for Women and Information Technologies Aspirations in Computing Awards. And we are looking for volunteers this week to help review high school applications for the young women, non-binary, and genderqueer students from Kentucky that have applied for this award. So if you are interested in donating about 10 minutes to review each application, please send me an email. I'd really appreciate working with you. It's a great opportunity to be inspired by the upcoming generation of technologists.
Yeah, I've done the reviews a couple of times, and it's actually really exciting to you know, we spend so much time, you know, working with our undergraduates and our graduate students. It's always fun to come, you know, go back and hear what our high school students are saying and feeling, and the passion that they have for computing is really amazing. And the program is awesome too. We have an award ceremony at the end. Kentucky usually does pretty well at getting in applications. Rosemary, isn't that correct? Kentucky usually does pretty well, but that also means we have a lot of applications to review. So hopefully we can get some volunteers here today. Thank you again to everybody. You know, pat yourself on the back for taking the time out to do this, because this is the kind of stuff that we really need on this project. As one of the co-PIs, especially working in the EOD area and workforce development, I can't say enough good things about what Kazi is doing, and I'm glad you've all got to hear more about it. If there aren't any other questions, I just don't want to, anybody has any lingering questions, feel free to stick around. Otherwise, I will see all of you at the Super Collider. Very exciting. We're going to go from nano to super. Have a great day.
Thank you all. Goodbye.
All right. I'm going to go ahead and end the meeting. It looks like we've got all of our questions answered. Have a great day. Oh, there was one right in there. Was it just a thank you? Okay, good.